Marko loved hiking alone in the mountains, not because he had no friends, but because only in solitude could he truly feel the forest. No conversations, no phone calls, no noise from the city. This time, he set out for an old forest region that the locals often spoke about in strange stories. They said that hunting settlements had once existed there, but all of them had disappeared long ago. Only overgrown trails and ruins remained. Marko did not put much faith in legends. To him, it was simply a great opportunity to spend a few days surrounded by nature. Around noon, dark clouds covered the sky. Great. Just what I needed, a rainstorm, he muttered. He quickened his pace, looking for shelter. Then he noticed an old wooden cabin standing among the trees. It looked as if it had been there for at least 100 years. A crooked roof, logs darkened by time. One of the windows was broken. Marko pushed open the door, which creaked loudly. Inside, the air smelled of dust and dampness. Almost no furniture remained. Only an old table, a few shelves, and a stone fireplace. Rain began drumming against the roof. I'll wait it out here, he decided. While the rain poured outside. Marko explored the cabin. On one of the shelves sat a small wooden box. It was covered with a thick layer of dust. Interesting. Marko opened it. Inside was a rolled-up yellowed sheet of paper. Carefully, he unfolded it. It was a map. An old one, drawn by hand. It showed forests, hills, and a river. In the upper right corner was a strange symbol in the shape of a golden circle. Beside it, someone had written in ink long ago, "Whoever finds the path will claim the treasure." Marko smiled. Of course, every old map has to lead to a treasure. He studied it carefully. Most of the markings made little sense, but one thing seemed strange. The map showed a location where, according to his modern GPS, a tourist trail should have been. Yet, the trail did not match. It was as if the map depicted an entirely different forest, probably just a very old version of the area. He folded the map and placed it in his backpack. When the rain stopped, he continued his journey. By evening, he reached a small clearing beside a stream. There, he pitched his tent. Lit a small camping stove, cooked dinner, and soon darkness settled over the forest. The only sounds were the murmur of water and the rustling of leaves. Marko sat outside the tent, looking through the photos he had taken during the day. Then he remembered the map. I should show it to a museum or a historian. He took it out of his backpack, unfolded it. And froze. Something was wrong. Marko leaned closer. A thin line had appeared on the a PA new line. It definitely had not been there earlier. It began not far from his current location and stretched deep into the forest. What? Marko quickly unfolded the map completely. The new path looked as though it had been drawn many years ago. The same color, the same style. No sign of fresh ink. He turned the map, over-examined it from every angle. Nothing. I must have missed it before. But a strange feeling settled inside him. He was certain that path had not been there. Suddenly, A strong gust of wind swept through the trees. Flame of his stove flickered. Leaves rustled all around him. Then Marko heard a sound somewhere deep in the forest. A large branch snapped. Dot. Then another dot, as if something very heavy was moving between the trees. Marko became alert. There could be deer in the area. Or bears. He listened carefully. The cracking sound came again. Then it stopped. Forest fell silent once more. Too silent. Marko looked back at the map. His heart skipped a beat. The new path was getting longer. Right before his eyes, a thin black line slowly crept across the paper, as though an invisible hand were drawing it. Marko jerked back. The map slipped from his hands. That's impossible. For several seconds, he simply stared at it. The line stopped moving, but now a small symbol appeared at the end of the new path, a triangle, drawn in red. Beneath it, words slowly emerged. Danger ahead. Marko felt a chill run down his spine. He lifted his eyes from the map. And at that very moment, he heard the same cracking of branches. Only now it was much closer. Far closer. As if something large was already standing among the trees at the edge of the darkness, watching his camp. Chapter 2. The Path That Draws Itself. Marko froze beside his tent. The sound of snapping branches was now very close. Something was moving in the darkness between the trees. Something large. He quickly grabbed his flashlight and pointed the beam toward the sound. The light swept across the tree trunks. Across the bushes, across the tall grass. Nothing. Only an empty forest. Yet, the feeling of another presence remained. Marko glanced back at the map. Red triangle was still there. Beneath it, the words stood dark against the paper. Danger ahead. He folded the map and quickly climbed into his tent. That night, he barely slept. Several times he woke to strange noises. It sounded as if someone was walking around the campsite. But every time he looked outside, the forest was empty. Only near dawn did exhaustion finally pull him into sleep. Marko woke to the sound of birds singing. The sun had already risen above the trees. The fears of the night now seemed like a foolish fantasy. Guess I really worked myself up, he muttered. He crawled out of the tent. Everything was peaceful. No signs of predators. No signs of people. Only dew glistening on the grass. And the map. It lay exactly where he had dropped it the night before. Marko picked it up. The new route had not disappeared. The thin black line still stretched deep into the forest. As if it were waiting for him. All right, he said aloud. Let's see where you're leading me. He packed up camp and continued on his way. At first, the route seemed ordinary. The trail wound between pine trees. Sometimes it followed streams. Sometimes it vanished among dense thickets. Marko constantly checked the map, and each time he noticed something strange. The map was changing. Almost imperceptibly. As if it had a life of its own. Whenever he passed a particular area, new details appeared on the paper. Bushes. Rocks. Fallen trees. They definitely had not been there before. This has to be some kind of trick. But he could find no explanation. Around noon, the forest began to change. The trees grew older. Taller. Every stone was covered in moss. A strange silence hung in the air. Even the birds were nearly absent. Then, Marko noticed something else. The path on the map suddenly ended, right in the middle of the route. Now what? He stopped. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the black line began to move, just as it had the night before. Right before his eyes, it crept forward, slowly, drawing a new direction. But this time, the route suddenly turned left, sharply, as if it were avoiding something. Marko looked up. Ahead of him was an old narrow trail. Yet, the map insisted on another route through the undergrowth. Wonderful. He hesitated. The sensible choice would have been to follow the established trail. But after everything he had seen, curiosity won. He turned in the direction the map indicated. The journey quickly became difficult. Had to force his way through dense bushes, climb over fallen trees. Marko was already beginning to regret his decision. I hope this magical map knows what it's doing. A few minutes later, the forest suddenly ended. Marko stopped dead in his tracks. There was nothing ahead, only a massive ravine. The ground had collapsed. Dozens of meters below, freshly broken trees jutted from the slope. Loose rocks still tumbled down into the depths. Marko felt his mouth go dry. The old trail ran directly through this area. Very trail he had planned to follow. A few more steps, and he could have found himself standing at the edge of the collapse. And if it had been foggy or dark, Marko silently stared at the map. He was no longer laughing. The map had saved his life. After that, he trusted it far more. Though somehow, that only made things scarier. How could the map have known about the landslide? More importantly, how had it known in advance? Later that afternoon, the route led into an old stone bridge. The bridge looked ancient, almost completely covered in ivy. A dark river flowed beneath it. Marko stopped to rest. Then, he noticed something strange, a symbol carved into one of the stones, the same triangle the map had drawn the day before, a red triangle, exactly the same as though someone had left it there many years ago. Marko ran his fingers across the symbol. Paint had long since faded. The mark was old, very old, yet the coincidence seemed far too precise. "Who are you?" he quietly asked the map. Of course, there was no answer. Dusk was approaching. Marko decided to camp near the bridge. The location seemed relatively safe. He unpacked his gear, cooked dinner, and once again took out the map. By now, he was doing it almost automatically. Immediately, he realized something new was happening. Red lines began appearing on the paper. One after another. As though an invisible brush were painting them. Marko tensed. The new markings formed symbols. Familiar symbols. The same triangles. Dozens of triangles. They appeared ahead of the route. In different locations. As if the map were trying to warn him about something. Then words began emerging. In the center of the paper. Slowly. Letter by letter. Marko held his breath. The message read, "They have awakened." Who are they? At that moment, a sound came from the direction of the bridge. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. As if someone were walking across stone. Marko spun around. The bridge was empty, but the footsteps did not stop. On the contrary, now they echoed from beneath the bridge, from the darkness where the black water flowed. Marko grabbed his flashlight and shone it toward the riverbank. At first, he saw nothing. Then the beam caught something strange. Tracks. Huge tracks. Not human. Pressed into the wet sand beside the water. And next to them was the same red triangle. Fresh. As though it had been drawn only minutes ago. Meanwhile, new words began appearing on the map. Do not follow the voices after sunset. And at that exact moment, someone quietly called from the dark forest behind him. Marko. The voice was human, perfectly familiar. The voice of his older brother, who had died 5 years earlier.
Thank you for watching. The continuation will be coming soon. You can subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.